you need to use your instrument.
First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to you all, ladies and gentlemen, for having taken part in this and taking part in the launch of the Free Nargis Coalition. I would like to talk a bit more about Narges and the personality of Narges and to help you understand the conditions in which we live. Let us go back a bit in time. And I'm talking about the time when Narges and I met for the first time. It was 2001 when I and four prominent Iranian lawyers and all of us who were giving pro bono defense to Iranian political prisoners, for which reason we'd all experienced prison terms. So the four of us decided to set up an NGO and call it the Defenders of Human Rights. We established this NGO, but we didn't have a proper office. We didn't have the budget. We didn't have facilities. So we couldn't make sure that our voice is heard throughout Iran. So we weren't really successful until in 2003, I was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. It was $1,200,000, which I received, and $50,000 of which I left outside Iran to help with the education of one of my daughters who was working on her PhD, and the rest I took to Iran. And with the money, I bought an office for the NGO, and I invested the rest of my Nobel winning in banks. And with the interest rate, which is pretty high in Iran, we managed to meet all the expenses of the Human Rights Defenders NGO. And thanks to that, we became more famous, and our NGO became a sanctuary for those whose rights were violated in Iran. We had many people who came to us asking for help, and at the same time, many young people became more aware of our human rights activities, and thanks to that, many joined us. And they were all working as volunteers for us. One of these volunteers was a young lady called Narges Mohammadi. At that time, Narges was married to a political prisoner, Taghi Rahmani, who is among us today. Her husband, Taghi Rahmani, was imprisoned in Iran for 14 years for his peaceful activities. And once when he was freed on bail, momentarily, he met Narges, who had just graduated from university. They met and they got married. And again, Narges' husband was imprisoned. And that is when I first met Narges, when her husband was imprisoned yet again. And in our NGO, we had a tradition that anyone who was imprisoned, we used to go and visit the families of these political prisoners, and that's how we met Narges, because her husband was imprisoned and we went to visit his wife. Narges visited our NGO and she was impressed by our work, and she joined our NGO and she became one of the most active members of staff in our NGO. some 30 young lawyers were working with us. We set up a committee within this NGO for women, and Narges Mohammadi headed that. And we set up courses for women in order to raise their awareness about their rights. And Narges continued to be extremely active and extremely influential in our NGO. And it was then when she became pregnant, and Kiana and Ali, she gave birth to Kiana and Ali. And I remember up to a week before her birth, she used to attend work every day. I used to urge her not to come to work. And I said, look, you're carrying twins. Don't come to work. Yet she insisted. And she said, until the moment my water breaks and I have to give birth, I am going to come to work. And fortunately, she gave birth and continued her work until 2009. Now, in 2009, the political climate in Iran became even closer than before. And security forces raided our NGO's office. They closed it down. And even my own personal law firms was attacked by the security forces and closed. All of us were in prison, including Narges. And at that time, all of us activists were threatened, and many were imprisoned. And one of the activists, prominent ones, was Narges's husband, Mr. Taqi Rahmani. But with Narges agreed that her husband should take the children out of the country. So the children were about 7 years old, the twins, and they experienced seeing either their mother in prison or their father in prison. So they came to a consensus, Narges and her husband, that one of them should leave the country, and they decided he should leave the country with the children to help them be free and have an education. And you have seen these beautiful two kids that earlier appeared on stage. And they have, thanks to their education in France, they have become very confident, and we are all very proud of the twins, especially myself. In And you have continued to support Narges, and Ali and Kiana have always been encouraged and supported by all of you as well. And thank you for that. But today, I want you to encourage the father of these twins, the husband of Narges Mohammadi, how he single-handedly raised these twins. Please, let's applaud Mr. Taqi Rahmani, husband of Narges Mohammadi. And now, let me take you back again to 2009. Several of my colleagues were imprisoned, and I want to mention one in particular. He is a Nasrin Sotoudeh, who has also won the Sakharov Prize and also Penn Prize, and she's been very active. And there are many others many of whom are still in prison. And every time it's just like Narges, they're freed for a while and then they're imprisoned again on dubious charges. But even from within prison cells, Narges did not sit still. She continued with her activities, and we've been witness to that. And as you see, she's managed to smuggle statements out of prison, and she has bravely defied the authorities and encouraged the people to continue the resistance. So the fact that people can see that a woman from within Evin, notorious Evin prison, is so active. It's very inspirational. And she also started a campaign from inside prison. And I want to say a few words about Narges's campaign, which she started from prison walls, inside prison. In about 2010 or 2011, Narges, who was in prison at the time, noticed that there is a public telephone booth in the male prison wards. And these male prisoners could use that public phone for 5 minutes every week. And yes, prisoners did for 5 minutes. They would talk to their families. But the women's prisons did not have this public phone. Why? Just because women in Iran don't have any rights. They didn't even have that telephone inside prison that men had. And she was, and that really bothered her. Not only she was away from her children, from her husband, and she wanted to at least be able to hear about the health of her family from at least her sister who was in Iran, or her mother. She wanted to at least be able to make phone calls. And so she protested against this discrimination, and she mounted a campaign from inside a prison. And I remember she started a campaign called Telephone for Mothers inside prison. And she was constantly giving statements from inside prison. And we, for our part, were trying to help her with this campaign and I remember in The Hague, outside the International Court of Justice, we held a demonstration. Many of our colleagues, including Mr. Taghi Rahmani, joined us in this protest action. And fortunately, Narges succeeded in her campaign, and since then there is a public telephone booth in the women's wards in the notorious Evin prison. And thanks to the resistance and the campaign of Narges, that female prisoners achieved that right. To you, it might not be a big achievement and a great feat, but it is. You can see discrimination for women exists even in prison. The male prisoners had access to something that female prisoners didn't, and this is something that Narges fought against. Now, I don't have much time, so I have to keep this brief. I would only like to highlight the importance of women life freedom movement, which began almost 2 years ago. Unfortunately, many of our young people were killed during protests on the streets. Some were blinded because the police, they were using bullets. And if you read the reports by the special rapporteur on the Iranian human rights, rapporteur in Iran, human rights rapporteur, you can see that many were blinded by these bullets and tasers that were used. The government itself has acknowledged that they arrested some 20,000 protesters. I remember that when I was imprisoned, it was, I think, 1999, and I was in the women's ward of Evin prison. I was the only prisoner. There was no other prisoner. I'm not saying that there were no female political prisoners before. Many had been imprisoned and many had been executed, and some had experienced lengthy prison terms. But when I was in prison, I happened to be in that period the sole prisoners, and I had 4 prison guards, 2 in the morning, and then 2 for the afternoon and evening shift. And I thought that was ridiculous. For one person, there were 4 prison guards. What were they afraid of? That is what the prison was like at the time. And Narges, but the last time I heard from Narges, she said, oh, it's very different. Now there is overcrowding in prison. Many women don't even have a bed. They have to sleep on the floor. That's because the number of arrests are now sky high. Why? Because women no longer fear repression. They say it doesn't matter if we lose our lives. We are fed up with this situation and we want democracy. And it is that spirit that now exists in Iran among women. The Iranian women and the people of Iran, I know that they will succeed thanks to this spirit. In this woman, life, freedom, yes, women were at the forefront of that movement, but thankfully many men joined that movement and fought alongside women, because Iranian men have become very much aware that women's victory will be a harbinger to democracy in Iran. I have always said that democracy will come to the country thanks to women. And that is what Iranian men have learned too, that they have learned that they have to join women in their struggles if they want to achieve democracy in the country. Sorry. And so far, sorry, I'm getting my timing, going over my timing. And all these protesters, many have been executed and some are on death row just for peaceful demonstrations. And the government is also repressing the families of those it has either executed or imprisoned. So they are constantly threatening these families, saying, don't protest, otherwise you will also be arrested. Mashallah, Karami is a young father. He was 20 years old and he had taken part in the peaceful demonstrations. Now this 20-year-old was executed. And his father just said, why did you execute my innocent child? Now, what did they do to his father? Arrested him, and he's been meted out a 7-year prison term. But the Iranian people are no longer fearful. Now, I am going to finish my sentences by wishing for the freedom of Iranian prisoners, and including Narges, and peace in the Middle East, and the main cause of which is the wrong foreign policies of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I'm going to finish with a poem. And this poem is not just about the Iranian people, it's about the people, innocent people of the Middle East who are experiencing dictatorship, theocracy, and futile wars. The poem goes as, and I paraphrase, we, the people of the Middle East. Some of us are killed on the battlefield. Some in our homes during bombings. Some drowned in the sea. And some die on the roads. Some perish in government prisons. Meanwhile, during all this, what does the world do? The world simply watches in silence. Why? Because they're under the delusion that dying is merely our occupation. Thank you very much.